Welcome to a Practice Pro CPD, brought to you by LAWPRO.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for joining us here at the program Building Resilience and Maintaining Mental Health in the Legal Profession. This is part of LawPro and the TLA's ongoing series titled Thursday Tips, where we give out practice management advice on particular topics. And today we're going to be talking about mental health. Thank you to Deirdre, Sandra, Joan, everyone at the TLA for helping to organize this program. My name is Sean Erker. I'm the legal writer and content manager at LawPro, and I'm speaking to you from Toronto, which is also where the offices of LawPro and the Toronto Lawyers Association are located. And I respectfully acknowledge that Toronto is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, as now the home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Now, this particular meeting is virtual, and so we're not all gathered at the same place. And for many of you, this land acknowledgement is not the traditional territory that you are on. And so we encourage you to take some time to learn about that and acknowledge the territory that you are on specifically. And you can do that by finding resources such as the website nativelands.ca, that's native-lands.ca, where you can find the appropriate territory acknowledgement and learn more about the land that you are on. So we thank the First Nations people who live and continue to live on these lands for sharing them with us. So to begin, a few housekeeping matters. First of all, we will be taking questions at the end of the program. So please put your questions in the Q&A box. Now, there's also a chat box, but we would request that you put the questions specifically in the Q&A box because it's a lot easier for us to manage that and keep track of what we need to answer. This program can be used to claim 90 minutes of professionalism for CPD, and it's worth one $50 risk management credit from LawPro. So that will come off of your next year's insurance premiums for attending this program. After the program has concluded, you will be receiving a survey from the TLA. So please take a moment to fill that out and give us your thoughts and suggestions, because it helps us prepare these programs in the future and make them as good as we possibly can. One more thing is that there are written materials for this program, resources that touch upon the subjects that we're talking about today. You can find a link to that PDF in the chat box of this program. You can also find it at practicepro.ca/CPD on the page for this particular program. And at practicepro.ca/CPD, you can find YouTube videos of all of our previous programs that are viewable on demand. And this program will also be available on demand starting approximately next week. So I'm very excited about the lineup of speakers that we have for you today. I'm joined by Michael Herman, who is General Counsel and Partner at Gowling WLG. Ronit Kaufman, who's staff clinician at Homewood Health, which administers the member assistance program for the Ontario legal profession. She previously practiced law in Venezuela, and she has personal experience with the responsibilities and characteristics of a legal career. Martine Morin, who's the unit director and counsel at LawPro. In the litigation unit, she handles claims that come in from lawyers across the province, and she is going to speak about LawPro's experiences, particularly in the circumstances regarding to making a claim. And we also are joined by Dr. Thomas Telfer, who's a professor at Western University Faculty of Law, where he teaches courses on mindfulness and the legal profession. So he is going to speak on the topic of mindfulness today. Now, the first half or so of our program is going to be structured a little bit more like a fireside chat with a discussion between myself and Ronit and Michael. And first, we're going to talk about, in a big picture sense, what we mean when we talk about mental health in the legal profession, what the statistics are, what the symptoms are of different kinds of afflictions and different issues that people can have with their mental health, and why that might particularly affect lawyers. Then we're going to talk about what we can do about it. And one of the big things is that LawPro helps finance the member assistance program, what we call the MAP. And Ronit is going to speak to us about the resources that are available under the MAP to help lawyers to improve or maintain their mental health, their physical health, and their overall wellness. We're also just going to talk about simple things that everyone can do to improve their mood, improve their concentration, and improve their ability to be productive and live fulfilling lives. Then we're going to be treated to a presentation by Martine, who's going to speak to her experiences helping lawyers when things kind of go drastically wrong. So that's obviously a circumstance in which there is acute stress. It's a circumstance that can lead to further problems with respect to mental health. And at LAWPRO, we see it and we know how to help people, and we can talk specifically about how sometimes things aren't as bad as they seem, and it's not the end of the world. And finally, then we're going to talk about mindfulness, and Professor Telfer is going to not only explain that for us and give us some information, but he is going to lead us through a small mindfulness exercise. So starting out, and so I just want to confirm here that we have Ronit joining us on video. So thank you very much, Ronit.
Thank you for having me here.
Of course. So when we talk about mental health, there's a few kind of big picture points to make right at the beginning. The first is that the Mental Health Commission of Canada says that 1 in 5 people live with a mental health condition every single year. And not only that, but approximately 50% of all people in Canada will experience mental illness by the age of 40. So this is not a rare circumstance. This is not something that happens to only some people. This is something that happens to, you could say, a majority of people. And it's something that we have to take account of in order to improve our lives, just like physical health. And so when we talk about mental illness, now sometimes we may be talking about things like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, but oftentimes what we're talking about are things like generalized anxiety disorder, depression, stress disorders, addiction and substance abuse, things like that. And so I'd like to start off by putting this to Ronit and asking her, what do we mean when we talk about generalized anxiety disorders or chronic anxiety? What does that look like? What are the symptoms of that?
Okay, thank you for having me here. First of all, let's take it back a little bit with what do we mean when we talk about mental health? So it's such a broad spectrum of well-beings, and there are some challenges that impact our physical aspect, psychological, even emotional. And so for the physical aspect, it's our brain. So that would be conditions like bipolar disorders, schizophrenia. And for those conditions, I would refer that to the specialists who are the psychiatrists and the neurosurgeons. Now, for conditions such as anxiety and depressions that psychologists, psychotherapists, and counselors such as myself, we deal with. And in order to understand a little bit what that is, if I may, I'm going to briefly introduce how we think. And I'm going to use the CBT model, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy model. And it's like, I'm going to, if possible, imagine that you have a circle. I'm just going to create a flow chart, an imaginary flow chart. So at this side, imagine that it's a clock and you divide it in 4, so 9, 12, 3, 6. So at 9 o'clock, you are triggered. And for legal professionals, we might be triggered with an external source, and it could be, oh, I just got a law complaint, a legal complaint from the Law Society sent me, somebody complained about my services. And that's really triggering for most of us. When that happens, immediately, and this happens really, really fast. Imagine you're here at 12 o'clock, you have an unhealthy thought. Psychologists call that cognitive distortions. So at 12 o'clock, you have this thought of, oh boy, this means that I am not good enough. This means that I'm not doing my work well. This means that I'm going to lose my source of income. I might not even be able to pay my student loan and my mortgage. And these unhealthy thoughts lead you to 3 o'clock here two emotions, the emotions of feeling hopeless, powerless, unworthy, invalidation, and anger, fear. Immediately at 6 o'clock, we have a behavior. And you've heard this, the behavior of fight and flight. But for legal professionals, fight looks something in the lines of, I need to take care of all the variables. And if I don't, all hell breaks loose. And that's the new trigger. Or if with like the case that I just put you or gave you, it's so I need to reply to the Law Society about this complaint, and it creates such an emotional pain inside that because maybe I'm not good enough and I don't want to feel this vulnerable, so I am procrastinating it and procrastinating it to the point when it really gets us, and that becomes the new trigger. That's the cycle. That's what most of us do on our everyday life. Now, there are ways to break the cycle. So that is what counselors do. Now, for chronic anxiety disorder, this is a group of mental health conditions that are characterized by irritability, being very worried. You're most of the day you're worried about different things in life. There is fear, and there are different ways that this anxiety shows up. So one of the ways, it's called generalized anxiety disorder. And in generalized anxiety disorder, you will feel tension, muscle tension, fatigue, worried most of the day for different things. And it can be assessed with different tools. The other thing that happens with chronic anxiety is panic attacks. And I see that in most of my clients. People feel lack of breathing, so shortness of breath, sweaty palms, maybe your stomach aches, and the one that it's very often you will hear, it's heart palpitations to the point that people go to emergency thinking that they have a heart attack. Two others that are typical of chronic anxiety are social anxiety, and as the word says it, people avoid being in social environments or social situations. The last one is obsessive compulsive disorder. And these are these recurrent thoughts of, maybe for legal professionals, I'm not good enough. I'm just faking it. I don't know what I'm doing. Or I might lose everything. I don't know if I'm doing the correct strategic for this case. So those are some of the intrusive thoughts. Other ways, it's repetitive behavior, which is compulsions. Now, with chronic depression, you will see people, some of the symptoms are that the sense of hopelessness and feelings of persistent sadness. So you feel sad most of the day. People cry out of no reason. You lose your interest to do the activities that you once enjoyed. Fatigue, that is rooted in lack of sleep. And we're going to talk about sleep shortly. So some people sleep too much. Some people don't sleep. People eat too much. People don't eat. And one of the most important concerns with chronic depression is that there is the recurrent thoughts of death and suicide. And so that's more or less what happens with what we are talking about, chronic anxiety and chronic depression.
You know, Ronit, it's interesting when you talk about chronic anxiety and you talk about this fight or flight response that lawyers have. Because one of the questions that we often ask when we talk about mental health in the legal profession is, why does this affect lawyers more than the general population? Because studies show, and one such study was the 2019 ALM study that found that 32% of legal professionals reported feeling depressed, 64% reported feeling anxiety chronically. And another study done by the ABA, the American Bar Association, found that lawyers were 3.6 times more likely to suffer depression than the general population. So there are obviously multiple explanations for this. There's not one simple thing that causes these distortions. But one thing that I like to bring up when I talk about mental health is that lawyers, by their nature, either by their nature or by their nurture, because of what we're taught in law school, are a pessimistic people. There was a study done at the University of Virginia that found that law students who scored higher on pessimistic traits also scored higher on their law school exams. But this was only true for law students. For other students, pessimism did not help them out at school. But for law students, the more pessimistic you were, the better you did. And that's because pessimism is associated with thinking of all the things that can go wrong and then planning for them, which is kind of a lawyer's job. But the problem comes when you then take that home with you and you apply that to everything in your own life. When you think of everything that can go wrong with regards to your own career and try to plan for it, or if you think about everything that can go wrong with regards to your relationships or your finances, and this can create the kind of spiral. So from your perspective, Roni, because you work with lawyers, what else would you say are elements that make lawyers particularly at risk of certain mental health concerns?
Mm-hmm. Different factors. That's an excellent question. So the first one, what I hear the most, and I experienced when I worked as a lawyer, it's the high level of stress. So when I was working, and what I hear is that legal professionals, we are like firefighters. We put down fires throughout the day, and we have tight deadlines. We have significant amount of workloads, and it's a high stress environment. We have to multitask throughout the day. The second factor is long hours. I remember that I used to work 12 to 13 hours a day, 7 days a week, because I have huge files to read and research. So long working hours can lead to burnout. And one of the sensations of burnout is that it's like this excessive fatigue. You get out of bed and you are unable to take one step forward. It's like you're so excessively tired. The other thing is that the client's expectations, I hear that a lot. So my clients, I feel the pressure that I really need to show results and win this case. And right with clients' expectations comes the emotional toll that lawyers and legal professionals we take. So I don't know what's the pensum right now at law school, but in my time, I didn't have mental health to learn about. I didn't know how to handle the things that I was about to hear, the people who are victims of violence or a tragic event, the things that I had to hear, or the graphic scenes that I had to see. I wasn't ready for that. And I don't know, and I don't think that some of my clients are. I was recently in a speaking engagement, and one of the judges said that it's not only to see these images, but it's the constant seeing of these images throughout the day, hour after hour, for different days. And it takes a toll on you. So that's vicarious trauma. We enmeshed with our clients to the point that we give so much, and that's compassion fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that affects us is that we really, really are so wanting to be of service. We try to be as perfect as we can. And everything in our cases have to be perfect. One thing that I suggest to my clients is that perfection is an utopian idea. Perfection doesn't really exist. You can aim for excellency. You can try to have a fantastic case, but it will never be perfect. We also have to deal with a competitive environment. I recently interviewed a lawyer who became a psychotherapist, and she said that she became a psychotherapist because she couldn't handle the backstabbing that was happening within the profession. Ethical dilemmas, which is like you have a case that goes against your moral values. And the truth is that we are so embedded in our research and reading and studying that we become very isolated. And the two more important ones that I get, it's that substance abuse. So I once asked one of my clients, so what is it about the substance abuse that, or the substance use that, and why are you taking it? And the client said, it makes me feel normal. Because of the amount of stress that she was under. And finally, it's the stigma, Sean. Like law is legal professionals' livelihood. And if people see that you are unable to handle your cases, that you have an issue, a mental health issue, you're afraid that you won't get any cases. And you won't be able to pay your student loan or your mortgage or sustain your family. So these are a few of the things that I hear in my sessions and that lawyers go through.
You know, it's good that you bring up the stigma, because that is something that we see at LawPro all the time as well. And it transitions us into our next topic, which is we want to talk about what we can do for ourselves, but also for our colleagues and for the profession as a whole to treat mental health, to improve our mental health overall, to improve our wellness. Now, LawPro co-funds the Member Assistance Program along with the Law Society of Ontario. And what that program offers is that it is free to all lawyers, along with their family, along with judges and law students. And it provides resources such as counseling, such as online resources. And I just want to put this to you, Roni, because you work with the MAP. So can you explain to everybody what resources are available through the MAP and how they can go about obtaining those resources?
Okay, thank you, Sean. So Homewood offers different mental health services to all members of the Law Society and LAWPRO. And so let's see if we can divide the services in, let's put it two branches, one up and one down. So the upper branch would be mental health and coaching. So in mental health, members will receive individual counseling, couples counseling. There is a division called trauma care and depression care, which is based on CBT. Additionally, Homewood Health offers like self-paced CBT So you go by yourself and you do the questions and the assessment. The other aspect or the other part that Homewood Health offers in mental health is coaching. So it's not only coaching in stress, it also in grief. If a legal professional wants to start their being a sole practitioner, they can help you start their, so it's called career coaching, nutritional coaching, smoking cessation. So it makes you stop smoking. Postpartum, so how to take care of babies and your own development after you have your babies. So there is counseling and coaching. The other part, the lower part of the services that the MAP offers through Homewood is the peer support program. And I would like to put it in the words of Henry Nouwen. So what is the peer support program? So Henry Nouwen says that we're all wounded. We all get wounded at some point in our lives, whether it's physically or emotionally or spiritually. And the question is not, how am I going to hide my woundedness, but rather, how can I put my woundedness in the service of others? So the wound, it's not right now a source of shame, but it becomes a source of service and healing. So when the wound becomes a source of healing, we become wounded healers. And that is what the peer support program is. The second part of the MAP. It's a group of volunteers, of legal professionals that had been wounded and have experienced it and are able to use that woundedness for the service of others. So it's a matching service. So I have a peer client that is going through the challenges of got a complaint from the Law Society and is really anxious, and I have a peer volunteer who had experienced that and was able to solve that, and I matched it. That's where the peer support program is. And
Okay.
people like legal professionals can use either one simultaneously.
And so, we have Michael here who's going to tell us more about the peer support program. But before that, I just want to go into a bit more detail about the rest of the resources at the MAP, because there is some resources in the program materials that will explain all of the things that the MAP can provide to you, how to find the resources online. And one thing that is changing very soon is that the MAP is going to be introducing the Pathfinder system. Now, this is going to be introduced on December 1st. It's going to be accessible through the myassistplan.com website, which is still the same URL that you would use today to access the online member assistance program resources. But what it's going to offer is a personalized path through all of Homewood's resources. So it will ask you some questions about what you're feeling, what your symptoms are, what you want to achieve. And through that process of asking questions and answering questions, it will refer you to online resources or counseling or coaching or a peer support program. And all of that will be done in an easily understandable way, and everything is done online. And I believe this has already been mentioned, but just to stress it again, the MAP program is completely confidential, and none of that information is provided to the Law Society of Ontario, and none of that information is provided to LAWPRO, except in aggregated form to know generally how many lawyers are using the program. Any information that you provide in counseling is confidential in the same way that there is doctor-patient confidentiality with any other counselor, and so none of that can be used in any type of claim or any type of complaint against the Law Society. So just keep in mind that all of that is anonymous and it is confidential. So we have Michael here, and Michael has been working with the peer support program at the MAP. So I want to just defer to him now. And Michael, just to start us off, can you provide us a bit of your background, specifically on how you became interested in being a peer support volunteer?
So, good morning, Sean. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. So, just to begin, I'd like to ask people to just try and imagine that you wake up every morning and you feel as if you are being sucked immediately into a deep, dark hole. And there is no light that enters into that hole, and there is no escape from that deep, dark hole. It's as if you are falling into an abyss every single day. That is what depression was like for me. I had been, by all accounts, a successful lawyer and corporate executive most of my career. And whenever I had difficulties, the advice had always been to push through. And so I had consistently and for many, many years just pushed through difficult times. I now realize I was suffering from mild to moderate depression for much of my life, and went through periods of severe anxieties, especially during major life transitions. But in 2016, I hit a wall and I crashed. And it started with physical ailments, not overly serious physical ailments, but they just wouldn't go away. Viruses and colds and digestive problems. And eventually I started losing all of my energy. I lost my ability to concentrate. I lost my ability to focus. And so I took a leave, and I wasn't really getting better. And I was looking into these physical ailments and really not improving. And there was a beautiful morning. It was early in June. I was standing on my balcony having a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden a thought came into my mind. I have no idea where it came from. And the thought was, what's the point? What's the point? And that thought staggered me. But it was the moment where I realized that I was likely going about this all wrong. That what was happening to me was that I was in the midst of probably a pretty severe depressive episode. And that if I was going to recover, I had to shift from focusing solely on the physical ailments and learn and find help to deal with what was causing this depression, this severe depression. And that started a long process of recovery. That process will continue for the rest of my life. But over time, and with a lot of help and a lot of changes to the way I approach my days, I was able to get back to return to work, back to living a life where I'm not falling into that deep, dark hole every single morning, where I was able to climb out of that hole. And I made a commitment to myself that if I ever recovered, this was in the midst of my depression, that I would share my story, that I would talk about my lived experience. And I started to do that. And then I learned about the peer support program, and just understand the reason I wanted to talk a lot about my experience was because for the longest period of time, I was struggling alone. I was struggling in silence. And I wanted to be able to reach even one person and let them know that they didn't have to struggle in silence. And so here was a program where I could, in a very tangible way, in a one-on-one way, be able to give back and to take some of what I learned, as well as the training that I received from the folks at Homewood, and be able to support those who are facing challenges similar to mine. So that's how I got from where I was to becoming part of the peer support program.
So Ronit gave some information about how the MAP can partner people up who are experiencing new issues that want some assistance and guidance with people who have gone through these things in the past. And from your perspective, as a peer support ambassador, as you're often referred to, how does that offer that support, that guidance that is being sought by people coming to the MAP? How have you seen that provide assistance?
Yeah, so it's important to appreciate, I'm not a mental health expert, I'm not a counselor, and the first thing we are told as peer support volunteers is you are not counselors, and that is drilled into us. And so we're there to provide support, to provide understanding, to provide empathy, to be able to engage in a dialogue, to reflect back that we really do understand, because of our lived experience, because of what we've been through and are still going through as individuals, that we really do understand what someone is experiencing, even though everybody's situation is unique and everybody's situation is somewhat different. And it helps, and I think this is really important. You mentioned this, Sean, so Ronit, it's confidential. The discussions that peer support volunteers have with the client is just between the two of them. It's non-judgmental, which is really important. And it provides a safe space. It provides a safe environment in which these conversations can take place. And so the peer support part of the program for clients is part of the broader program to help empower the clients with their own recovery through the dialogue that can take place. And the key, one of the keys that I have found for me and in talking to other volunteers, is that it's clear when to the clients that those of us who are volunteering, we have no agenda other than to help people in whatever way we can. And as I said, that's typically by learning how to listen very carefully, being supportive, being understanding, being non-judgmental, and giving them a safe space. And we can talk about a couple of specific examples of that. The last thing I wanted to just say about the volunteers is annually there is an enclave for the volunteers, and it's a day-long program, I think, Ronit, most of a day. And I've attended a number of those enclaves, and the thing that has probably amazed me more than anything is how much passion these people bring to this opportunity to be of service by being volunteers and peer support volunteers. And that passion comes through when they are talking to individuals that they are matched with. That answer your question, Sean?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Wonderfully done. Now, just another question based on what we're talking about here. So how, and Ronit, this can apply to your position as well. What kind of things does the MAP take into account when matching up a someone who comes to the MAP with some issues with a peer ambassador? What sort of characteristics or questions are asked in order to find the best match?
Do you want me
So,
to answer that, or
yeah,
Michael?
Ronnie, why don't you take it, and then I may supplement it from my perspective as a volunteer.
So when the client calls Homewood, the intake will ask Homewood, would ask the client that if they want just a peer volunteer, or if they want counseling. So if it's a peer client, it becomes, that's part of the program. If the client wants just somebody to be matched that will be a support and not receiving any type of strategies or skills or counseling per se, then I receive the client and I contact the client and I ask the client what exactly is that the client needs, and is it any specific area of law, is like a specific religion or gender inclination. So after that, then I go to my database and I try to see which one of the volunteers have experienced or match with the needs that the client have. And then I give the client the email of the peer volunteers and they are matched. They contact each other and they decide how often they are going to see each other or talk to each other. It's like at their own basis.
Yeah, and what I have found is it really is looking at the client's needs and the client's circumstances and then finding that good fit. So, for example, while I'm a very addictive personality, one of the things I've not become addicted to are different types of is either alcohol or certain types of drugs, fortunately for me. So I may not be a good fit for someone who's dealing with substance misuse problems. But for someone who's dealing with depression or anxiety, I can understand, I can really get what they are experiencing. Again, everybody's situation is unique, but I have that opportunity to be able to bring a certain understanding of the experience that they're having.
So, Michael, you said previously that there are some specific examples of support that you've been able to provide. Could you walk us through a couple of those just to know kind of what it means to be in that setting?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And I'll give you two sort of very different examples of relationships that I formed through the peer support program. So one is with a young lawyer. So age was not necessarily something that we shared. He's a lot younger than I am. But he has, as I've learned, treatment-resistant depression and pretty severe anxiety disorder. And I remember the first time we met, and he was really, really tense. He was constricted. He was sort of like a ball just ready to explode. And he was having a really difficult time, both personally and mainly professionally at that time. And over the course of an hour, where we were just talking and getting to know each other, and I was doing my best to just sit and listen and offer support. And by support, I mean not just, oh, I get it, but really validate the experience that he was having. Really recognize that this is a legitimate experience. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing, it's easy to say. There's nothing that, you know, this is a valid experience in what you're having. And just over the course of that hour, as we were just interacting with each other, I could actually visually see this individual start to release, to let go, to recognize that he was engaging with someone and it was safe and it was non-judgmental. He wasn't going to get a lecture on he should be doing this or he should be doing that. No, do this and it will help you, or do that. It was just someone who was going to be there for him in a way that allowed him to be able to talk about his experience. And that led to about a 5-year relationship that we had, where we would, every 2 or 3 months, we would get together, and during COVID, we would do it virtually. And we would talk, and we would talk about where he was and the issues that he was addressing. And we would talk a lot about, with this particular individual, we would talk a lot about self-care, because he was trying all sorts of different ways of trying to have different self-care routines that he could find that would work for him, that would ease some of the symptoms that he was experiencing. And I would ask him if he was interested in hearing about some of the self-care routines that I had tried, some of the things that I found that had worked for me, some of the lessons I had learned in my journey. And we would engage on those things. And we just do that every 2 or 3 months. And as I say, that went on for about 5 years. So that's one example of a type of relationship. And I think he would have found it very helpful to have that ability to check in and engage in that type of conversation. A completely different example involved a much more senior lawyer. And this lawyer, much closer to my age, he is a sole practitioner. And he had spiraled downward into a pretty severe depression because of a very contentious dispute with a client that had resulted from a mistake that he had made. So he was now engaged in difficult and quite ugly litigation with the client, and it really caused him to spiral downward. And he and I met about 4 times. And the first time we met, he said to me at the end of about an hour over a cup of coffee, he said, you know, you're one of the first people that I've been able to talk with that I know really gets it. I know really gets what I'm feeling, because I can sense, not that I've necessarily been through his experience, but as a lawyer, and that I could really understand what he was experiencing and the impact it was having on him. And then we met about 3 or 4 times, and primarily the discussions would be about the fact, although he knows it, we all know it, we're all human, we all make mistakes, but we talk about the fact that this was a mistake. Yes, we all make mistakes. Most of the time, our mistakes, we don't even know about them, never mind somebody else finding out about them, never mind them leading to the type of ugly, contentious dispute that he was involved in. We talked a lot about, over his lengthy career, all the people that he'd helped and that he'd been of great service to, and who benefited from his advice and guidance. And we talked in a very non-clinical way, which I think was helpful, because neither of us could talk about it in a clinical way, about how the struggles we have had throughout different phases of our career with perfectionism, which is something that Ronit mentioned, and with imposter syndrome, which is something that Ronit mentioned, and with the fact that we can have difficulty because we tend as lawyers to put on a mask when we're lawyers. That's what clients and other lawyers expect. We got the answers. We're confident. We know what to do. We're here. We're going to solve the problems. We tend to forget to take off those masks. And so we leave them on all the time. That takes a real toll to have to wear that mask all the time. So In this case, once the dispute was resolved, it was settled eventually. The weight was lifted off his shoulders, and he found that his mood improved quite dramatically in a very short period of time. And in our last conversation, he repeated, he said, the key was, when I was talking to you, I knew you got it. And I think that's the key of the ability of the volunteer, who again is there for the client, the ability of the volunteer with the client to be able to convey, I really get what you're talking about. So those are two examples. Okay, Sean?
That's great, Michael. So I want to make sure that we stay on schedule here and we get to our next two speakers. But before moving on, Michael, just one more question for you. If you could maybe briefly give a bit of context or advice with regards to what, from being a mentor and working with the peer support system, you have learned that you can apply to working with your colleagues, working with your family members. If you see other people who might be experiencing some problems, how do you approach them? What's the best way to offer your own advice or offer your own help? And perhaps what other lawyers listening to this can do if they see people who are going through some problems?
That's a great question. And there's not an easy answer to that question. One of the things that I have become both within my law firm and more generally is a bit of a mental health champion. So I do have people approach me. When I was approved as a peer support volunteer, I was asked to participate in training. And that training provided a lot of really valuable help in terms of how to engage, how to listen, how to be supportive, how to be empathetic, how to provide information if requested, all of those sorts of skills, which are not easy and can be difficult to apply. In terms of approaching someone who you think may be struggling, and there can be all sorts of reasons why you think somebody may be struggling. And it could be personality changes. It could be work performance issues that are unusual for the person. It could be, attitudinal changes. It could be hints, if you're listening carefully enough, that they're dropping. Or it could be, a lot of absence. There could be all sorts of reasons why you get a sense that someone may be struggling, and they may be struggling in silence. It's difficult to know, and if somebody's not ready to engage in a discussion with me or with somebody else, then you need to know to back off. But I have found if I approach the person and if I ask whether or not there's something they want to have a discussion about, and if they say no, I'll let it go. And then if I ask if this is the right time and place, or to find the right time and place, and then make sure we're in the right time and place. And what I find sometimes will happen is somebody will say, no, I don't need to talk, or, there's nothing to talk about. But then a couple of weeks later or a month later, they'll come back and they'll say, you know what? You asked me a month ago, can we have a discussion? Maybe I'm having some issues. I'd like to talk to you. Or I'm not sure you're the right person to talk to. Is there somebody else I can talk to? And can you direct me to somebody else? And then, as I said, it really becomes about listening, validating or legitimizing, providing information if requested, providing support, providing guidance if requested, and that's what we can do. And it's all about letting people know, and part of this is also spreading the message, and it goes to stigma, and it goes to all of the things that you and Renee were discussing, is letting people know that you do not need to struggle in silence, and that there are people and there are resources and there are ways in which you can be supported.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that can often lead to these triggers of anxiety or stress is having to report a malpractice claim to LAWPRO. And so in the program materials, we have an article called Putting the Fire Out that is written by Martine Morin, who is unit director here at LAWPRO and deals with these things all the time. And so I'd like to invite Martine to turn on her video and join us and talk a bit more about her perspective on that side when it seems like perhaps something disastrous has happened.
Thank you, Sean. As you know, I wrote that article, Putting the Fire Out, several years ago, after I've been at LAWPRO for about 11 years now, and I've helped resolve thousands of claims at this point. And I started to see, the connection of or mental health issues arising in claim files and dealing with insureds. And we really see the impact that having a claim, or even a potential claim, or the idea of making a mistake has on lawyers. So for some people, they're just upset about it. For other people, they get really angry or combative. But for some people, just like we've heard today, clearly the stress of the situation is just it's unbearable for them, and they don't respond. Either they'll report and then they go sort of MIA. They can't bring themselves to respond to requests for information or what have you. But in other cases, they've just frozen and they haven't been able to bring themselves to report. And, this might have, be something that they've lived with for years. It could be, years later that the error or the claim comes to light. And now, of course, it's a late report. So it's that, same issue that we've heard about today is, kind of dealing with the anxiety or the fear of making a mistake through sort of procrastination. We see cases where firms have been totally taken by surprise that a lawyer has been struggling and has not been working on files. And sometimes this happens with individual lawyers as well, but ultimately, when things do come to light, that person hasn't had support or hasn't been able to deal with the situation. We're talking, we call them cluster files, but many dozens of claim files where, things have just really, got spiraled out of control at that point. I should note that sometimes what we see is that, someone will be struggling with mental health issues, and that's what sort of impacts the inability to sort of deal with what you need to be doing on an everyday basis. But in other times, it is the actual practice of law and, trying to keep up that cause the issues for the lawyer. I was thinking about this, and what I think is a big stress for lawyers is, what makes the practice of law so tough is all the deadlines. I practiced in the area of litigation when I was in private practice, but, even for solicitors, you've got a closing date, you've got, there's limitation periods, there's notice deadlines. And in turn, that's one of the biggest areas when we look at claims by type of error. Time management errors is one of the top 3. And so you can see when lawyers aren't able to deal with an error or bring it forward or talk to a partner or talk to someone about it, it gets worse and worse. It kind of compounds things because, not only have they missed the deadline, but now, it hasn't been dealt with quickly. So there's, after a certain amount of time, you're going to lose the ability to be able to fix the situation. One of the other things we see a lot is stress surrounding making a claim. So, that thought that, well, only bad lawyers make mistakes, or, this happened to me because I'm a junior lawyer or a sole practitioner or from a small town. In fact, almost 50% of lawyers will have to have a claim against them at some point in their career. And that includes senior lawyers, experts, lawyers at big firms. In fact, last year we had 2,910 reports in. So, you're not alone if you need to make a claim report. That's almost when you look at that on working days, that's almost a dozen, or on average, a dozen reports that are made every day. Last year, we also had approximately 4,400 claim files open during the year. Another reason that people, I think, find it difficult to or stressful to make a claim is the financial strain that they associate with reporting a claim. So, basically the worry about having to pay a deductible. So, the reality is simply making a report to LAWPRO does not result in a deductible being called. We resolve almost 40% of our files are closed without any payment at all, and almost 50% are closed with expense only. And that's because we do so much more than simply defend lawyers who are have been sued. The first thing we're always looking at is trying to prevent a loss altogether, whether we need to do a repair or we need to, we can get involved and try to avoid there being a claim situation in the first place. And of course, the reality with the fear of reporting, for whatever the reason is that it is there's a much greater likelihood that there is going to be a financial implication if you don't report or you report late. Just to let people know what happens when they do report. Your claim is assigned to a claims professional here at LAWPRO, and you're not put through the third degree. You're not going to be judged. The first thing, we have amazing claims professionals here with experience in many areas of law. Sometimes, but not always, they will retain outside counsel, and we have an amazing group of outside counsel as well. They'll go through things with you. For you, it might feel like, this is a totally new thing, but the person you're dealing with, the claims professional, has likely seen this many times, and can help you navigate through dealing with your firm, dealing with the client, help you, assess what next steps to take. So that will start on right away at your first call. And many of our counsel are able to jump in, on very short notice to help you if that's what's needed on an urgent basis. And we're always looking at, look, how can we fix this? How can we make it go away? And so we really are on, we have the same goal as you, which is try to close the file without any payment being made at all. And while obviously that can't happen all the time, we work really hard to do that. For us, it's very frustrating when, we know that we could have helped you to avoid, having an actual claim or a lawsuit because the claim has been reported late or been left too long. So it's great to see now more and more, and I think there was a question related to this in the question box. We're seeing more and more firms are appointing an E&O manager to assist lawyers with making the report in the first place. Small firms where the senior lawyer, assists the junior lawyer in the process, with giving information, someone, in short, someone that the lawyer can go to and ask for help. It can be very hard for some people to even make that phone call or make that report. We also see colleagues, sometimes it will be people from a totally different firm that are helping their friend, to just get that report in. And that's really the key, because once we have that report in from you, we can assist you in trying to, get the information you need. For some lawyers, even that, getting the information, getting us, the other people involved is just so hard once they've shut down. And we're used to seeing that. And we can help you, figure out ways to get us the information that we need. Whether or not if you're at a firm or in partnership, whether or not you believe in the impact that mental health issues have on lawyers. When things go really wrong, where someone has been, they have had an issue that's been going on for years, there is going to be a financial impact, whether it's in the loss of clients or financially. So it's really in your best interest to be making sure that you are checking in on people in terms of, what is their workload? Are they taking their vacation? Do they seem like they're doing well? And, I think more and more firms are trying to, take some steps to make sure that people are feeling like they have someone they can go and talk to. But we still have situations where we have younger lawyers who are calling in and they don't want anyone to know. And so I think that is really an important step that people can take at the firms to make it easier for lawyers to come to them. So many, what people might think are a mistake can be fixed if you move quickly. And that's really the irony, because when you're anxious or you're afraid, you're not going to go to someone if you don't think that their door is open. I think Michael's going to chime in a little bit about what he does at his firm, but if I had one point I wanted to make today, it is, don't let a mistake make you sick, because, we have so many fantastic lawyers through LAWPRO, our outside counsel, who can help you. And we have great success in doing so. And if you think you've made a mistake, email in, get your information to us, and, we want to help you work it out.
So, Michael, I see that you have turned on your video. I take that to mean that you have a comment on this topic.
I do, but I don't want to infringe on Professor Telfer's time, because what he's going to be speaking about is really important. But if it's okay, I'll spend about 1 minute just supplementing what Martine was saying. I think that what we're seeing, and again, we had the University of Sherbrooke study that was commissioned a couple of years ago that generated a lot of discussion. I think what we're seeing is that in larger law firms, and even the mid-sized law firms, There's a lot more emphasis being placed on mental health. There's a lot more programming. There's a lot more resources. There's a lot more effort to create safe, non-judgmental environments where people can come forward and talk about issues and not be afraid of the impact it's going to have on their career or the direction or how they're perceived. Where I am still very concerned, and so that's improving. There's a long way to go, but that's improving. I think it is still a challenge for the profession, and I think the profession needs to acknowledge the challenge and is for those people who are in small firms, solo practitioners, those who are maybe in smaller areas, not the big cities like Toronto and Ottawa and Hamilton, but and how do we bring what the larger firms are doing for the people within their organizations and create communities for those who are in these smaller either firms or regions, so that they are also able to have access to these resources. And I think good work is being done, but I think that's an important focus that we still need to address in some way.
Just very briefly, I'd like to point out that there's a few other things that we always recommend that will help with mental health and wellness and keep people operating at a higher level and keep people happier. And it may sound obvious, but a lot of it is getting a good night's sleep, eating right, and regularly exercising. One statistic I like to point out is that most people require 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And by most people, that's almost everybody, which means it's almost all lawyers. There are very few exceptions, even if you feel like you can operate on less than that. If you do get less than 7 hours of sleep, it often leads to negative emotions, irritability, lack of productivity, trouble concentrating, and other physical ailments. And a study done by Ipsos Reid found that almost a third of lawyers were regularly getting less than 6 hours of sleep. And so that's almost a third of lawyers who were not operating to the best of their ability and were experiencing the negative mental health consequences of this. Now we're getting near the end of the program. We do have some questions in the chat. I want to take a few of them. We probably will not be able to get to all of them, unfortunately, but if you do have questions, you can send them to sean.erker@lawpro.ca. That is my contact information, and I will be happy to follow up on anything that we've discussed today. And as Dr. Telfer mentioned, he has resources for his mindfulness program in the program materials, which the link to that is available in the chat, or it is also available at practicepro.ca/CPD. The video of all of our previous programs, including the programs that are referenced on page 34 of the program materials, are also available on practicepro.ca. So just to grab a couple of questions here from the Q&A box, I'd like to put this first one to Michael. And the question says, they're wondering if you have recommendations for a lawyer communicating with their family members who usually lean heavily on them. Now, I hope I'm not misinterpreting this question, but I think what this is getting at is that although it's extremely important to reduce stigma and to encourage people to talk about mental health and to reach out to people, sometimes we also need to establish boundaries because sometimes we're not in a position to be able to offer that shoulder, that ear. And how would we go about doing that?
So it's an excellent question, and unfortunately, as with so much of this, there isn't a right and wrong answer, and it really does depend on the family dynamics. And family can be an enormous, or a close friend can be an enormous source of assistance. Allowing you to be able to share what you're experiencing and how you're experiencing it, and getting support from family members or close friends. But in some cases, families will struggle with anybody who is experiencing some sort of mental health challenge. It's just difficult for them to acknowledge or recognize, and they will, as I was told when I was much younger, just push through, just get past it, just snap out of it. So I think we need to be careful. We need to, really assess and not expect from family members, but to the extent that there are those, and it may not be everybody, it may be one or two people who can be a support and be of help, tremendously valuable to have. For me, in my experience, having my wife who was there for me was invaluable as part of my recovery. But I can understand that in other situations, family members may not be helpful at all. So it's an evaluation, it's an assessment that one needs to make.
So we are at time here, but if everyone can give me a couple of minutes, hopefully you'll forgive me for running a little long. I just want to grab one or two more questions. This question I want to put to Martine, because the question says, many lawyers do not report or make a claim because they worry that doing so may create disciplinary exposure with the Law Society. And so Martine, is there any way that you can address these concerns? Oh, sorry, Martine, you are muted.
Sorry about that. LAWPRO is independent from the Law Society. There are certain activities that all of us as lawyers are required to report to the Law Society, but the majority of files that we have here at LAWPRO, we are dealing with damages, we're dealing with errors, and we're trying to deal with the matter on that basis. So we're completely separate from the Law Society. And, ironically, or it's not ironic, but it's the case that the rules of professional conduct require you to report a claim if you suspect that you have made an error. So it's really, again, just creating more issues by not reporting.
Thank you, Martine. And one more question we have here, and I might direct this at Ronit a little bit, but are some lawyers more prone to anxiety or depression, for example, litigators, than other lawyers, or lawyers in large firms versus small firms? And I know there's going to be lots of different things, and it's going to be very individualized, but obviously one thing that does affect the mental health conditions, you mentioned vicarious trauma during your presentation. And although that can affect any lawyer, because almost all lawyers are helping their clients with one of the most stressful events in their client's life that can then redound to the lawyer, obviously, some lawyers work with very traumatic facts in criminal law, sometimes or family law, and that can sometimes lead to other concerns. So have you noticed anything about whether some lawyers should be more specific, or different practice areas that can impact mental health?
Yeah, indeed. Family law, criminal law, those clients are the ones that experience more vicarious trauma. The lawyers that are, I'm not taking the importance on specific areas of law, because they are all very stressful. We try to do everything at the same time. However, those who are more in corporate and don't have to deal so much with the one-on-one and taking on the emotional weight of the client, then they don't deal with that as much. However, having said all of that, we also have to take into account each person by itself, because the strength that you have might not be the strength that I have. And I might be working in corporate law, but I am unable to take all the anxiety and the stress of the job. So it depends case by case, and not necessarily so much yes, the specific area of law, it's important, but also it's important the psychological, the emotional, the social, the cultural background of each person and how they approach life. So it's a wholeness in each one of the clients.
Right. And it's true that different facts and different stressors and triggers will affect different people differently. And so when we talk about the strengths, we're not talking about an overall assessment of the person. We're talking about how certain elements of a profession can impact people because of everything that's happened in their lives. And so it is going to be extremely individual. So thank you so much, Ronit. And I know we've two things, we've gone over time. So I appreciate everyone for sticking with me for 5 minutes, and we're not going to be able to get to all the questions. And so I apologize to that, but you can email me at the email address that's in the chat right now if you have further questions. I thought I heard someone breaking in. Did somebody want to say something before we finish? No, I think we're okay. Thank you again for joining us. One more reminder, please fill out the survey that you received from the TLA. Tell us what you liked about the program, what you didn't like, so that we can learn from that. This is worth 90 minutes of professionalism, CPD, and 1 risk management credit through LAWPRO. You can find this program and other programs at practicepro.ca/CPD. And our next program happens on December 7th, and that is on client relationships and communication breakdowns. Michael, did you have any other questions?
No, I just want to thank you and thank everybody for listening in today.
Excellent. Thank you so much from LAWPRO and the TLA.